The congressman is got a bill proposing strong punishments, the strongest punishments ever for gang members here illegally, and now some of those very cartel members that have been designated a foreign terrorist organization like MS-13. So, Congressman, great to have you here. Let's take this in focus. What's up?
David, good morning. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for letting me talk about this important topic.
So let's dive right into the bill. H.R. 3242, Punishing
Yep,
Illegal Immigrant Felons Act.
that's right. Yes, sir. So this law addresses a very real loophole that is unfortunate, and it has enabled serious crime to be committed by illegal immigrants for a long time in this country. It basically makes a delineation between an American citizen who commits a crime and an illegal immigrant who commits a crime. And it is triggered as soon as an illegal immigrant is convicted of a felony. And up until this point, there has been no distinction between those two categories, Americans versus illegal immigrants. And the basic premise of this law is once you commit a crime here in the country while being here illegally, we stipulate that being here illegally is a crime. But any criminal behavior that's committed by an illegal, our tolerance for it is over. We should not have to commit resources to continue to investigate, to gather evidence, to prosecute people who are here illegally. And so there are three basic provisions, David, to my bill. It says, first, any person who is in the country illegally that commits a felony, that's state or federal, will be subject to a new federal charge that carries a mandatory sentence of 5 years in prison up to life. Secondly, and this is where it gets very important, and I'll explain why, any person who illegally re-enters the country, so any illegal re-entry, regardless of criminal history, can face up to 10 years in prison. And then lastly, any person who illegally re-enters or comes back to this country illegally with a felony conviction can now face 10 years to life in federal prison. And what you see right now, David, is there's a perverted cost benefit analysis. The illegal re-entry statute, so that's someone who is in the country who gets deported and then returns illegally, they face up to a maximum of 2 years in jail. That's it. And that is, in my experience as a federal prosecutor, that is absolutely no deterrent at all. 2 years in federal prison for someone who comes back into the country illegally. They can still run their criminal enterprise from prison. They get released from prison, and they have a new feather in their cap. It's almost a status builder. And so I had people who I prosecuted, David, who literally were deported after serving prison time, and they were back in the country within a week, a month, 6 weeks, etc. The committed criminal who wants to come back to this country under our existing laws, they do not face sufficient deterrence to dissuade them from coming. And so my basic tenet in this bill, it's efficient, it's appellate proof, and it sends a message. Our tolerance for any person who is here illegally, who commits crimes, is finished. It's over. And, the president has done a terrific job and an essential job in securing our border and prioritizing removals. That's the first step that we must take. However, this alone is not enough, and it's not enough for two reasons. First, whenever another Democrat is in the White House, the border is going to be opened again. That's what they believe in. That's what they want. That's what they will fight for, and I believe it's for nefarious political reasons. And then secondly, like I just said, a wall and deportations alone are insufficient for the class of committed criminals who will come here to enrich themselves by stealing from Americans, by killing Americans, by poisoning Americans, whatever it may be that they do, they will continue to come back because they enrich themselves so mightily at the expense of Americans. And so my bill It categorizes the illegal criminal in a separate fashion to make it easier to convict and easier to remove, whether it's deportation or serious jail time. We remove them from our society. It's quicker, it's more efficient, and it'll be a real deterrent from this type of behavior from continuing.
Let's combine a couple of elements under this administration and your proposal. Again, H.R. 3242, Punishing Illegal Immigrant Felons Act, proposed by Congressman Brad Knott, with his co-sponsors, of course. So if we have a mandatory minimum, right, as you laid out, these minimums for the criminal, and as someone who's been in that prosecutor's seat, does this also open the door to, and when combined with a closed border, which is an important component of my question, where it's harder, almost impossible, but not impossible for them to get back in, as we've seen the remarkable change from Biden to Trump, when combined with those two things, does that also leave it up to, or does it also include the ability to say, look, you got a 5-year mandatory minimum for this level, or you're out of the country, and knowing that we have a more secure border provides a second layer of that criminal not being able to get back in?
That's exactly right, David. So what I tell people is I use this example. When I was prosecuting, there were numerous cases where someone was deported after serving prison time. And they were serving prison time for heinous crimes. Child trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, fraud, etc. And they come back to the country within a month of deportation. And the only reason they do that is because they know that they face a maximum of 2 years in prison for illegal reentry. As a prosecutor, I knew that 2 years was insufficient to sufficiently punish this person and to remove him or her from our society, to remove their threat that they pose. So what I would have to do is I would have to reprioritize dollars, agents, local police forces, federal agents, etc., to investigate this person, to establish what I already knew them to be doing, right, committing serious crime, to build a case, to charge the case, to prosecute the case, and then either plea agreement or try the case. That's a 15 to 24-month endeavor. And then once we convicted them, sure, you can give them 25 or 30 years. But that should not be required if someone is a known criminal and they return to the country to commit crimes. And so my bill basically says if you have a felony conviction and you return illegally, all I need to show is you're present and you have a felony conviction. Boom. That's it. 10 years to life. And when that bill is passed, and I think we've got a great shot at passing it, it will absolutely go through the airwaves and reverberate through these criminal channels that the United States is finished tolerating criminal behavior from illegal immigrants. And so, yes, the border, it needs to be closed. Yes, deportations need to continue. But for that niche group of people who are committed to coming here to enrich themselves at the American people's expense, it will serve as a mighty blow to their efforts. And we have to do it. That loophole has not been closed for decades, and it's past time that we do it. Every community across this country feels the effects from illegal immigrant criminals, and a minority percentage of the illegal immigrant community commits a far outweighed portion of the crime. And if we can address it, we will see the criminal numbers go down across the country in a real way, and we need to do it.
My guest, Congressman Brad Knott from North Carolina's 13th District, H.R. 3242, as proposed, the Punishing Illegal Immigrant Felons Act. This congressman sounds like a good layer to add to all of the other actions. As you know, law enforcement needs those layers to exist. You need security. You need all of these things in place. You need punitive measures. You need them to be carried out. You make a very good point about the time it takes to carry out a prosecution. And many Americans are not aware of the total cost of crime in this country. It's not in the hundreds of billions, it's trillions of dollars a year, of which a large percentage comes from illegal alien criminals, their effects on
That's
families,
right.
on costs, on the system, and so much more. So thank you for doing this, Congressman. We're just waiting on the president to speak shortly, so I
Yep.
appreciate the conversation this morning. Your efforts. Please keep us up to date on next steps.
Yes, sir. David, you hit the nail on the head. The cost cannot be overstated. Just for perspective, in 1990, there were around 5,000 Americans who died from drug overdoses. We are approaching 130,000 people per year. Over 1 million people in the country since 2000. You cannot overstate the cost that open borders has brought to this country. So thank you for the time on this subject. I'm happy to come back and discuss it at any point. This is very important, and again, we must pass this bill.
Adding layers to American security, always a good idea, Congressman. Thank you so much for
Yes, sir.
joining me.
Thank you.
Congressman Brad Knott from North Carolina's 13th District.